Welcome to the Courier Journals, conversations from the front line of the courier and logistics industry. Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Courier Journals, and it's been a bit of a week. I've been interviewing, as a lot of you know, for a indoor sales executive position and a traffic controller / account manager position, and we found an excellent candidate, a really good candidate, and he's joining us. This is for the indoor sales executive position. He's joining us on the 25th of August, but I could have my dates completely messed up. But he's joining us somewhere towards the back end of August, and we're getting him a little earlier than anticipated, which is helping us an awful lot because we really need to hit the ground running sort of in the next month, and that's purely because if you've done sales in same day before, you'll know that once you get into October, November, December sort of time, around the peak period, people are a little bit objective should I say, to moving their courier service, and you can understand why. It's at a time of year where things are moving quickly, goods need to get A to B far quicker and far more frequently than what they probably do throughout the rest of the year. So we get it. So we really need this guy in sort of earlier than what we hoped, which was initially meant to be in October. So we're really happy about that. However, we did want two indoor sales people, and we actually offered the role to two other candidates, and unfortunately was turned down by both. I guess the difficulty that we've got is that all our staff are self-employed, so from drivers to myself to the rest of the team, we're all self-employed. It's just the model that we have at the company I work for. So it's not for everyone. Self-employment isn't for everyone, and I think sometimes that actually can put drivers off as well. I know a lot of drivers turn around and say self-employment, it's not for me, etc. I know I have that problem when I'm recruiting. So yeah, it's been one of them weeks, you feel like you're getting somewhere and then you hit a brick wall. But yeah. Now, I have been posting a little bit on social media, and I did say that when things now crop up on the pod that I feel like are worth talking about, I will put them on social channels, and I did recently. So we had a scenario whereby we had a Luton that was delivering a long wheelbase load down to London from Yorkshire, and when he got down there, the construction workers saw the tail lift and thought, you know what, it beats handballing the goods off, so we'll use the tail lift. The courier then charged me for the use of that tail lift, and I then actually passed that charge on to my customer, who wasn't best pleased, to be honest. And I kind of understand. As I say, I did put it out on socials to get your thoughts and everything, so I put it out there, and Plan B Logistics got back in touch and said, interesting. Firstly, as the driver, I would have contacted you and asked, but to be honest, if he was expecting to handball off, then it was a bonus that one of the pallets could be taken off with the tail lift. Therefore, he would not have been on site for as long as expected. From a business side of things, I maybe would have offered to split the tail lift charge 50-50, advised the client, if a regular one, that this time the fee would be waived. However, if we go back to the site and it's used, then the charge will be applied. It's all down to customer engagement and then realising what is involved and also managing those client expectations. The problem that we had with this particular delivery is we'd done multiple deliveries to this site in long wheelbase vans, and the construction guys had simply handballed the goods off, which was why I was taken aback when the driver was asking for the tail lift fee when it come around, to be honest. Peter got back to Plan B, and Peter Ogilvie said, I heard it on the podcast, quite ridiculous in my opinion. The driver had the equipment for a quicker offload, a tail lift, why not use it? You also said he's a regular subby, he's on about myself there. I'd have paid him the extra money and made it very clear it's very short term thinking. And I think I did do that. I went back on text message with him, and I kind of explained that I wasn't happy at all that we were being charged a tail lift fee for goods that could have been handballed off. I think the problem that the driver probably had in that instance was he could have turned around to the construction guys, couldn't he, and said, well, just handball it off. But how would the construction guys what would they have actually thought if if the driver turned around and said, I'm going to charge you if you want to use the tail lift, they'd have just thought, sod it, we'll take the goods off on handballing. And that was my thought process, is it's a quicker offload. You offload and offsite quicker. The alternative is you let them handball the goods off. Either way, I mean, you wouldn't have got a handballing fee because you wouldn't have needed to have got involved because there was enough guys on site. It was just ease. To me, it was daft. Liam Grenou got back. Liam, I do apologise if I have got your name and pronunciation of your surname utterly wrong. Perhaps next time this can be explained in advance to the customer before the vehicle even gets onto site. Again, because it was a regular subby, and I think I just overlooked it. It wasn't even something I'd even thought about, as we'd done so many deliveries to this particular site and the goods had been handballed off the vehicle. So as I say, I think it was a case of the drivers, the construction guys on site thought, hey up, there's a tail lift here, it'll help us out, we'll be done a bit quicker, and it benefited everyone. So yeah, one of them. Anyway, Liam got back, because I essentially said that in my response by saying, I'm an ex-HGV driver, used to tail lift deliveries. I find that companies that try to add it as an extra cost rather than incorporating it into the cost will potentially lose customers. I own a Luton with a tail lift. Wish I could say that using the tail lift is an extra £20 charge. And I think that says all you need to know, doesn't it? We shouldn't have really been charged that extra as far as I'm concerned. Freddie Fletcher also got involved on YouTube, and he basically responded by suggesting that the Luton driver was taking the piss, and he suggested that I block them. To be honest, I have seriously considered blocking them. I think the annoying thing is as I say, we use these guys regularly. They're a subcontractor for us on a regular basis. They charge a premium, but they've never let us down. In this instance, they charged a premium on top of a premium as far as I'm concerned, but as Freddie said, James should I say, it's because his business name's Freddie, James has rightly said he was taking the piss, and that's the end of that. The other thing that I spoke about on the last episode was couriers not using what 3 words. I just don't understand it, and I've still had multiple scenarios this week as well. As I say, to me, what 3 words is a lifesaver. If you are a so-called professional courier driver, and I use the word so-called because to me, you should be aware of all of these apps that can assist you in making your life easier, then you need what 3 words. So Mark C1290 got back involved on YouTube, and Mark said, I wish everyone used what 3 words, as it solves one of the most frequent issues when delivering, i.e. where exactly do I go? We all use apps these days, so this one should be on everyone's device, which is literally what I've just said, isn't it? It's a no-brainer. It takes you to the metre squared of where you need to deliver. And when so many deliveries are to people that are doing work, etc., and sometimes the postcodes just don't bring you out where you need to be. I mean, I'm not a big believer in using postcodes anyway. I do always try to use the business address, or I try to use the full address rather than just the postcode. I can't stand postcodes. They just, to me, they just don't take you where you need to be anymore at all. But yeah, so if you are listening and you are a courier and you have not got what 3 words on your phone, go and download it now. If you can take anything away from this podcast today, go and download what 3 words. I did promise, didn't I, Courier Journals exclusive, that I would give you the name of that new international company that was hitting the market this year. We're in the multi-drop sector, looking to compete with Every and take as much of Every's work as they can. I explained, if you've not listened to the countless episodes beforehand regarding this, how the rates just weren't there for us. As I say, in London we was being offered £1 per parcel. In Birmingham, I think it was as little as 80p. In Manchester, maybe a similar sort of figure. Even as a CSP, so if you're not familiar with the terminologies, DSP, you essentially come to the warehouse, you pick the goods up, you be on your way. As a CSP, you'll actually arrange the facility of generally a HGV vehicle that will go and collect your parcels from the main hub and then bring them back to your unit, and you'll then distribute them to your drivers the following morning. But even on a CSP model, I think the pay was only about 20p extra per day. So there really wasn't an awful lot of margin in there. But, drum roll, the company name is J&T Express. Go and research them. They are a huge hitter. They're a huge company that are obviously coming to the market. As I say, they may well cause a little bit of disruption. At the minute, we've not seen it. I think, we're doing a lot more work with Every at the minute, and I personally don't think the volumes have decreased. It's certainly not from what I've read online. So at the minute, they've still got a bit of work to do, but if you're not paying the rates, you're not really going to get it, are you? You're not really going to get the drivers in that are going to really keep these contracts and win additional work for you based on the performance. So, this is the industry for you. Now, guys, if you've listened to the pod for the past 14, well, what will be now 14 episodes, you'll know that I love a bitch and a whine, right? I'm a woman after all, so, we enjoy that. But I always try to get involved in sort of topics on Facebook groups, things like that, because it drives traffic to my page as well. And I'll do it under my handle. So people, I guess, unless you listen to the pod, you don't actually know who I am as such. And I can remember responding to this particular post, and it was all to do with rates, and people were arguing that they couldn't even get £1 a mile on a small van, etc., etc., all the usual stuff that you tend to see. How the rates going to the bottom, CX is this, CX is that, but you'll continue to use it, and you won't go out and get your own customers. But anyway, a conversation for another time, and a conversation we'll no doubt have again and again and again. But anyway, I commented and I basically said, not all shippers are the same, because I'm tired of every single shipper getting a bad rap. We're a shipper. We don't do any jobs on CX with our own vans. I think in the past year, since I've been, well, not since I've been with the company, because I've been with the company over a year, but in the past year alone, we've probably only done about 4 jobs on our own vans. Everything we use CX for really is just our own jobs and subbing them out to drivers. So I was kind of defending us shippers, really, and I went back on there and said, we're not all the same, and I give him an example of a couple of jobs that we'd done, and we paid well on them. And he got back on his high horse and essentially said, well, provide your CX ID and I'll know then whether you're a good payer or not. And I said, well, how will you know if I'm a good payer? You can't tell by feedback as to whether I'm a good payer or not. Even if I've got all positive feedback, it's not going to say this person pays really well for their work. It's not. It's going to tell you if I pay on time and if I'm all right to deal with. That's it. That's the bottom line. Anyway, so he turns round and he says, well, if you provide your CX ID, I'll know if I've done work for you or not. And he hadn't, or at least he hadn't until that point, because this young fellow actually did a job for us about 10 days ago in a small van, 112 miles, and got paid £120. I rest my case. But fair play to the guy. He was really good. He was super professional. He was 10 minutes late with a 1 hour window for collection, but I'm looking for perfection at this point because of how much of a keyboard warrior he was. But no, he did everything right. He provided an update in terms of waiting time, because there was a slight delay because the goods he was moving was glass and it hadn't been packaged correctly, and he was concerned, and rightly so, and he reported that back to me and said there might be a little bit of waiting time on this one. I don't think there ended up being any, but yeah, he did a really good job for us, and he followed it up with a message after he'd done the delivery, which, as I've mentioned in the past on previous pods, when you're looking to build rapport with shippers and things like that, it's always a nice little touch just to drop them a message after, because we're no stranger to it. We're always trying to get off the phone quickly because there's always something going on, isn't there? So sometimes just that little message after you've done a delivery can go a long way. For him, he needed that message, because obviously the only message I'd received prior to that was him basically giving me shit about my rates that he'd never ever done a job for. Now he knows differently, although he doesn't actually, does it? Because he has no idea it's me. So I'm talking absolute shit, because he still does not know that I am, in fact, the Courier Journals, and he's done a job for me on CX. Oh, the power of a mystery handle. And my only other last gripe that I've got, before we get into today's topic is people that bid on jobs, and they'll bid extremely high, and then it's like they've dwindled down and dwindled down and dwindled down. We had an 18-ton job. I lie, it weren't 18 ton, it was a 7.5-ton job going out of Basildon on Friday, heading over to Gillingham. And the company in question that actually did the job for us, right? We've used them before, and they always charge a premium, which is fine, but it's the fact that they start ridiculously high and then gradually make their way down, and then sort of say to me on the phone, well, I tried to get this job earlier, so I'll have to check now if the driver's available. You were bidding £130 more expensive on the job earlier, pal. That's why I couldn't give it you. So just to let you know, if you don't know the area, Basildon to Gillingham, and this particular postcode to postcode, was 34 miles, right? And they originally quoted £350 for a 7.5-ton job. Now, some of you may well be listening and say, well, that's a fair enough rate. Maybe if it's an end user, and even then I consider that quite on the premium side. So I didn't have that kind of money in the job, and he gradually made his way down to 220, to which, even though he wasn't making a mass amount of money on it, we paid him. But it literally was like slow-mo over the course of 3 hours as he gradually brought his rate further and further and further down. Like, for God's sake, on what planet was you getting £350 for a 34 mile job? It just... And then to, as I say, complain at me because I've taken so long to allocate you the work. Well, just bid a reasonable price in the first place and I'll give it you. If you're listening to the pod for the first time and I'm catching you a little bit off guard with how straight talking I am, I do apologise. I'd tell you I'm not normally like this, but I'd be lying. So anyway, introducing today's episode, which is of course the customers every courier hates and the ones we love. We've had them all. All right, the customer who says it's only a couple of boxes and it turns out you need a Luton. But we've also had the customers that I genuinely enjoy working with. Today, we're talking about both. It isn't about naming and shaming. It's about the behaviours that make courier jobs easier or much, much harder. And of course, with some real life examples. So the first thing that we hate as a shipper, and I'm sure couriers do, is when the customer doesn't know their goods. And I've seen a lot of couriers at the minute basically explaining how they're incredibly unhappy with the amount of shippers that post jobs on CX and they don't give any sort of load information. And we're probably one of them shippers. If you've listened to the pod before, our biggest customer doesn't provide us with the details and the dimensions of the goods that they're sending unless it's close to the threshold of weight or DIMS, and then they'll give some sort of indication. That's just because they're so big. You know, they have teams on site, they've got a warehouse team, and then they've got a procurement team, or all three departments we deal with. So it's really difficult for them to often have all that information at hand when they're booking. And sometimes we slow the process down by asking them for all that information. But as I say, they're generally quite good with it. They also know that if we send the wrong vehicle because they've not given us the correct information or all of the information, that's their cost, not ours. They're forking up that driver's fee, whatever it may be, which, by the way, I'm seeing a lot of 100% cancellation fees, which is a little bit annoying. You know, it can be a little bit annoying. But yeah, when the customer doesn't know their goods, whether it be that they think they're turning around saying it's just one pallet and we're sending in a small van, and it might be an oversized pallet, or it might be a pallet that weighs 700 kilos, you know, incorrect weights, it'll fit in a transit. You know, I hear that all the time. The terminology transit, I hear all the time. And I never know whether people mean a short wheelbase or a long wheelbase when they say transit, because it's like different people have different terminology when it comes to the industry, right? We've got a traffic control starting, as I say, next week, tomorrow actually. And one of the things that I'm sort of planning to educate her on is, if they say a transit, do not be satisfied that it's going in a short wheelbase. Ask the questions, because different people are calling transit and meaning different things by it. So make sure you ask for the dims and the weight if they've not stated, and that's the terminology that they're using. But yeah, if the customer would give us all that information, and some of them do, which is great, then happy days. Some of them give us half of it. So some of them will turn around and say, right, it's 6 pallets and it weighs 2.5 ton. How big are the pallets? You know, these are the things that customers don't always give the information to. And sometimes we get burned, sometimes they get burned. You know, they're told, as I say, if we send the wrong vehicle, it's your cost, not ours. And what you'll find as soon as you start doing that is they'll soon start providing the information, especially when it's close to the threshold. Because I'll be honest, I think that's what originally happened with our customer, our biggest customer, is there was regularly requesting the wrong vehicle size. And it got to a point where I turned around and I said, look, we can't carry on like this. It's hurting your finances and it's pissing our drivers off. So let's get something in place. And that's when I give them some guidelines that they really needed to follow. I said, I understand you're in a rush, but if you're moving something that's 950 kilos and all you're doing is requesting a long wheelbase van and you're not stipulating it's 950 kilos, you need to tell me, because some of them might not take it. You know, it's being clear with them, but it tends to be, as with anything, you tend to get burned before you really start to learn. The next thing that I guess that you could say that we as shippers, couriers can't stand is that last minute customer. I mean, we're working in same day, we're working in urgent work and ad hoc work, so it often is that, isn't it? It often is the last minute customer. We'd love it where everyone was planned in advance by a couple of days, and we are lucky to have a couple of those customers that do plan in advance for their movements and things like that. But I think one of the things that grinds my gears is the address change after I've already allocated a driver, because then it's a case of, you know, is that driver going to charge me a cancellation fee? I can't then charge my customer a cancellation fee because the job's still ongoing. They've just changed the address, which, by the way, I'm intrigued to know. Does anyone charge a cancellation fee when they're simply changing the address? Get back to me on that one. And that might be I'm talking for a book in advance. So let's say they've booked for collection tomorrow afternoon for delivery the following morning. Would you, if they changed the address and you'd already allocated the driver, would you charge them a cancellation fee or not? Let me know on that one. I'm super interested to get everyone's feedback. The other thing is when they had another collection whilst the driver's actually already en route. And it grinds me when a driver will charge me an absolute premium when that's the case. We've had it before, right? We had a 18-ton job going from Yorkshire it was going to Yorkshire. I think it was going York direction, then on to Hull, then on to Nottingham. And there was an extra drop added, and it involved the driver going a little bit back on himself because it was added as an urgent last minute collection. And he charged me an absolute arm and a leg. And it baffles the brain why these drivers do this, because you're just cutting off your nose to spite your face. You know, you might well earn an extra £100 on that job, but I'm never giving you a job again, because you're just taking the piss, you're taking liberties. You know that there's nothing I can do, because actually if I charge the customer a fee to get an additional vehicle in to do that same job, they're going to be paying a premium. So it's so annoying when drivers just essentially take liberties. The other thing that's super annoying is the changing of delivery times. That drives me nuts as well, especially again when the driver's got the goods on board and the driver gets pissed off, especially when it's a time booking. We had one the other week, and bless him, he actually has become one of our preferred drivers down in sort of Essex way, and he had a delivery into Hoddesdon, and it was at Booker's, if anyone's familiar with it. And the driver did the delivery for us, arrived there at 8 a.m. for what we thought was a time delivery. And then we was informed that actually the time delivery was at 12 o'clock. What on earth? Thankfully, the driver was so patient, bless him, and he stayed until 12 o'clock. The customer was charged the waiting time, and Bob's your uncle, but 4 hours of waiting just because they got the delivery time wrong. The other thing is when it suddenly needs 2 men. When a delivery that you thought was advised that it was a one-man job suddenly needs 2 men. We don't have that happen, thankfully, to us very often. But again, irritating when it does, and it causes some real issues. Thankfully with CX, we would probably just turn around and try and get a driver there quickly, ASAP, to support. But we have had it. We had a job, again, sort of Yorkshire way, York into Goole, I think it was. And it needed a second man for delivery point, which was annoying because, again, there were so many construction people on site. For crying out loud, just someone come over and give him a helping hand. It really does, back the brain. But sometimes changes aren't always possible. Sometimes we can work around them, but they're almost definitely going to cost you more. There's never really any changes when a customer makes them last minute that doesn't involve additional costs. And I would always encourage any other shipper or driver out there to always try and incorporate that, because it's really, we're in an industry that is really based on communication and planning. And when a customer doesn't plan properly and then communicates badly because they're communicating last minute, it can really impact your day and therefore your earnings. So make sure that your customer's aware that things like last minute changes are almost indefinitely going to cost them more money. Then we've obviously got the silent customer, right? And what I mean by that is customers who just seem to disappear when their delivery's ongoing. They don't answer the phone. They don't answer emails. It's bloody phenomenal when that happens. And then, by the way, you've got a driver that's going batshit crazy at you. You're the shipper, you're the middleman, and you've got a driver giving you shit, but you can't get hold of the customer because the customer's gone AWOL. And again, these are things that sometimes the drivers don't understand. We're not intentionally doing this on purpose. We're not delaying you on purpose. We're not giving you all the information that you want on purpose. It's just because sometimes the customer has gone quiet. I can't tell you how many times, right, that I've done deliveries for a customer, and at delivery point, when I try to ring my customer because, let's say, something's gone wrong, which I'll come on to in a minute because there's ample scenarios, isn't there? When I try then to ring my customer when something's gone wrong, they're on the lunch break or they're in a meeting. And sometimes I'll exhaust my contact book trying to find someone to get hold of. And these, again, are the things that the drivers think you just sat there twiddling your thumbs waiting for them to come back. I'm not. I'm actively trying to solve the situation. I'm actively trying to get you a contact number, or I'm trying to speak to someone that can help. But it's not always that simple. Obviously, when they don't send any sort of loading details, it's really, really frustrating. And speaking of silence, it works the other way too. When they don't tell the site that we're delivering to that they're expecting a vehicle. We had a brilliant one the other day on that note. Oh my God, fantastic. So imagine this. I take the booking off the customer on the Wednesday, right? The load details are it's an 18-ton going from Yorkshire down to London. Marvellous. So the customer says to me, right, Emma, it's really important that we get this delivery there tomorrow. Friday, she said, because the road actually is going to be shut for the following 2 weeks after we've done this delivery. Right, okay, no problem. I kid you not, the driver turned up there on the Friday and he was reversing an 18-ton down a residential street, trying to get it as close as he possibly can to the delivery point, because guess what? All the roads were closed. You couldn't write it, could you? And the problem that the customer had was they would either have to bring the goods back on the Monday, but the difficulty again was they needed them goods on site. That's why it was sent, that's why they use a premium service to make sure them goods get there. I mean, lo and behold, we managed to actually get it unloaded. I think the driver ended up being on site 2 hours. He handballed himself, bless him. I was really appreciative of him, and yeah, we paid him a healthy fee extra for the work that he did. And to be honest, the customer couldn't complain either. But things like that. And the funny thing is the lady that booked it went on annual leave. So again, when we talk about silent customers, it's them making sure that someone else is aware of that delivery. Thankfully, with this particular delivery last week, I actually told her colleague when she'd gone away, I said, initially they wanted a Moffat for this delivery and we've not been able to get one. The closest thing we can get is a tail lift with a pump truck. We ain't getting a Moffat in 24 hours. And the other thing was we couldn't send an Arctic down due to access and things like that, because we did have an Arctic available with a Moffat, but again, couldn't do it because of access. And so we already imagined that there was going to be issues. I just don't think we envisaged that the road was already going to be closed on the Friday. As I say, it was meant to be from the Monday onwards. Although the driver did say, which again, funny, is he said that there were signs everywhere saying that it was shut from the previous day, which again, if they would just communicate as the customer, the team on site could have told the guys in the office, right, cancel that delivery because actually the road's closed today. As I say, they knew for 24 hours that road was closed. So, but hey, it's always the shipper, right, that's at fault. But let's give a bit of balance here. All right, let's give a bit of balance, because there are customers that couriers love, or shippers that couriers love. And that's because they know the dimensions. The goods are ready when they arrive. They inform the delivery point that you're coming and the collection point, if you're dealing with a different department. They communicate, so important. They pay on time, which is rare. And they respect the actual drivers. If only they were all like this, right? And some of them are, listen, some of them absolutely are. One of my favourite things as a shipper is when I get feedback on a driver. And the nicest thing for us is in the year and a half, 2 years now that I've been doing and running this particular department of the company I'm working for, the nicest feedback we've had is actually about one of our own drivers, which is really, really pleasing. And we'll bend over backwards for the customers that do all of the above, because we just want to be paid on time, drivers respected, communication in every department, the goods actually being ready at the time, and knowing the dimensions. But we do, and we are part of an industry that unfortunately things go wrong. And I think this is where, as I've always said, the best companies, the best shippers, the best couriers have always got some sort of contingency plan in place. They communicate more than ever, because without communication, we can't solve the problems. Now, my biggest customer pet peeves, right, are when they turn around and they say, it'll only take 5 minutes. And driver's still waiting 25 minutes later. There's nothing worse. I don't like it, right, when drivers allocate 30 minutes for a collection and it takes 30 minutes, right? I don't like it, because if that happens let's say that driver does 3 deliveries that day, and that happens at collection and delivery for all 3 deliveries, that's 3 hours lost. That's 3 hours that could be spent elsewhere, earning more money, driving somewhere else. It's painful, and it really does grind my gears. Can you just wait? No, I can't bloody just wait. Give me the information I need. Give me it now. Why have you not got this information for me already? Drivers love it when that happens, don't they, as well? When the forklift driver comes over, it says, can you just wait? You're in a queue, mate. And then you look and then there's 5 vans behind you, or when the forklift driver's on break. It's always brilliant, that one, isn't it? You've got to sit there an extra 20 minutes because the forklift driver's having a brew. There's only you in the yard. He could literally come off his break, tip you, or load you and have his break, or take an extra 5 minutes after his breaks, whatever it may be. But oh no, the forklift driver is on his break and he's got to have his brew and biscuits. Drives me crazy. Another one, it's only round the corner. I love that. It's 20 miles away, love. Since when has 20 miles been around the corner? We get that one all the time. And then they'll complain about cost for a 20-mile delivery. And I'm like, but it's not round the corner, is it? It's 20 miles away. It's at least a 40-minute drive. But, couriers and shippers, they aren't perfect, are they? We talk about communication all the time. It's just as important for the communication to happen from the courier and the shipper as much as it is the customer themselves. I especially love it when couriers turn round and go apeshit about the load that they're collecting, when they don't communicate that the fact that they're late for the collection or they're late for delivery. They don't communicate that they're actually waiting on site. That is my biggest gripe. The amount of drivers now, we had it again the other week. A driver was waiting on site and he rang me after an hour and said, I need waiting time charges. And I said, but you never told me you was waiting. I can't pay you waiting time when you don't tell me that you're waiting, because I will try and speed things up. Because whilst you might be dealing with the warehouse staff, I'm dealing with the people in finance. I'm dealing with the people that are booking the job. And trust me, they don't want to pay any more on this delivery than what they have to. So they will nudge the guys in the warehouse, but you've got to tell me that you're waiting. And it doesn't matter how many times I tell the drivers, and I tell the drivers the same thing. It's the same drivers as well. Tell them over and over and over and over again. When you reach that 20-minute mark, please let me know so I can get them to get a shifty on. I want you on the road, they want you on the road, or at least they do in finance, as much as you want to be on the road. Communicate and we'll try and make it a little bit quicker for you. And that also links in very well with late updates. Late updates about if you're going to be, if you're going to be late for collection, if you're going to be late for delivery. The more time that you can give us to provide the customer with some sort of update will help us keep our reputation intact and your reputation intact. Because the other thing is especially when it's smaller companies, it might often be the warehouse staff that have booked the delivery. And if you are turning up an hour late to collection and they've not been informed, guess what? When you get there, they're going to turn around and say, you should have been here an hour ago. And you're going to be arsey with them, they're going to be arsey with you, and it all just gets solved by simple communication. If you're going to be late, tell us so we can inform them. If it's then going to cause them a problem, we'll arrange alternative means, but just communicate. The other thing I can't stand is dirty vehicles. I'm not sure whether I mentioned this on a previous pod, but we had a driver do a collection for us the other week, and a beer bottle fell out of his van. Can you imagine how that looked for us? And the customer was fairly new. It was a fairly new customer for us at that point, and they hadn't done an awful amount of deliveries with us. They'd done enough for them to know it's not the level of service that they come to normally receive, but they hadn't done an awful lot. And yeah, this driver rocks up and opens his van door and a beer bottle drops out. Keep your vehicles clean. That is literally your pride and joy, or at least it should be. We're always complaining about the cost of these vehicles, but nobody wants to clean them. The other thing, bad attitudes. If the forklift driver is on his break, I know it's irritating. I get it. But you are a representation of the shipper's customer or your own customer. Just be polite. At the end of the day, if it goes over that 30 minutes, you're going to be getting that waiting time. I think in the end, when I was going out on the road, I actually took my iPad with me, or a book, for if ever I did have those times where I was in waiting time or things like that. I just always made sure I had something with me to try and avoid me getting so irate at the fact that I was waiting. There's so many drivers that I find that are just always angry and always grumpy. Like, lighten up. you're getting paid. As soon as that goes after that 30-minute mark, you're getting paid. And granted, there are some days that are a bit shitty. There are, because as I say, if you've got 3 deliveries or 3 collections and every single one takes half an hour for you to load and tip, then you've lost 3 hours of your day, and with no additional pay. And I get why you would be arsey, but surely to God, that's not every day. Surely to God. And yet we still get drivers that are so bloody grumpy with the bad attitudes. You've also got missed ETAs, or just not following simple instructions. We have a delivery, again, I think it's into Bookers, where it's a time delivery, and you can arrive anywhere between 25 minutes before and 25 minutes after the delivery booking time. So for example, if the booking's at 11 o'clock, you can arrive anywhere from 10:35 till 11:25, and drivers will arrive at 10:15 and then we'll get fined, and then they can't understand why we're knocked off with them. It's a time delivery. If you want to charge me a little bit more because it's a time delivery, then charge me a little bit more. It's common sense, guys. It really is. We want, I think the thing that grinds my gears is we want everything from the customer, right? We want all the information. We want them to communicate. We want them to be respectful. But yet, if we're going to ask that of the customers, the drivers have also got to be professional back. We had a driver turn up to a job the other day. It was just a handballing job, and it was one of our own, so I can't even slate CX for this. So he was going and he was helping someone with a delivery. So he was just assisting, essentially. It was complete handball. There was no mileage. Well, there was mileage to get to the job itself, but no actual mileage on the job. And we paid him a nice fee. We paid him a real nice fee for what was the best part of 20-30 minutes work. And he got there, and the driver and he unloaded. He didn't like the fact that he had to lift some heavy stuff, which kind of comes with the job, but never mind. And when the customer's customer was going through the checklist to make sure that she'd received all of the items, she mentioned this, and she said, I've just got to go through the checklist to make sure I've got everything. And our guy turned around to our customer's driver and said, right, well, I'm not part of this. This isn't part of my job remit, so I'm going to get off. What do you mean you're going to get off? We're paying you a nice whack. It was 3 figures, right? To just stay with the driver for the full delivery. See it through. Offer good customer service. Nobody likes a bad attitude and non-existent professionalism. Nobody. I got a right gobful off my customer for that delivery, and if I'm not wrong, we've not had a job since. Now, on that same theme, I had a really great entry for Courier Confessions this week, which, by the way, if you have got a Courier Confession, please email it in or send it in via any of our social channels. So if you're not aware, we're on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram and Facebook. Please do send them in if you have got a Courier Confession. But yeah, are you ready for this one? So, as I say, fits really, really well with the episode and what we've just been talking about. So the person in question says, I've been doing same day work for a few years, and this happened on one of those days where absolutely everything was going wrong. I got sent to collect a pallet from a warehouse, got there, gave them the reference, and they told me that the goods weren't ready. 20 minutes went by, then 40, then an hour. I was getting more and more wound up because I'd already got another job lined up afterwards. I rang the customer and basically had a bit of a rant. Told them that this wasn't acceptable. I'd been sat there for over an hour. I was losing money, and if they wanted me to wait any longer, they'd need to pay me waiting time. The customer was actually really apologetic and said they'd ring the warehouse. About 5 minutes later, someone came out to the van. Turns out I'd been waiting at the wrong unit. Same industrial estate, same company name on the building, but the collection warehouse was 3 units further down. The goods had been sitting there ready for me the entire time. I then had to ring the customer back after I'd just given them an absolute earful and say, yeah, slight update. I've never apologised so much in my life. To make it worse, the customer just laughed and said, don't worry, these things happen. They were nicer about it than I would have been. Safe to say, I now check the unit number about 6 times before I complain about waiting time. And I think that fits impeccably well with everything that we've been discussing on today's episodes. You know, drivers want professionalism, they want everything, they want all the details, and sometimes all the details are provided. Look at what 3 words. I provide what 3 words with so many of our deliveries, and yet they still aren't used, and the drivers will rock up at the postcode and say, the postcode's bringing me out elsewhere. Yeah, I know. That's why I give you what 3 words. That's why I literally said, don't use the postcode, use what 3 words. And still, somehow, you've managed to turn up at the wrong place. This industry, honestly, it baffles my brain sometimes. Anyway, guys, that marks the end of today's episode. Thank you ever so much for tuning in. Please do, please, like, follow, get involved on social media where you can. As I say, we are on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. Please get involved. Please follow us on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube. It's much appreciated, and it helps more people from the industry see the pod and get involved in the discussion, because as I say, that's the bit I like most is hearing your guys' feedback on the episodes about things I've talked about. And I'm not always right. You know, we as women like to think we're always right, but I know that we're not always right, and sometimes I think it is a matter of opinion, and it's always interesting to see what everyone else is thinking. So again, thank you for tuning in, and I shall see you on the next episode.